following video is reposted on all my social media channels as a public service and in defiance of big tech, deep state censorship. You can do your part to defeat the Orwellian Nazi cabal by sharing and reposting this video on your channel.
It's our purpose to bring to bear the principle of common sense and rational discussion to the issues of our day. America was created at a time of great turmoil, tremendous disagreements, anger, hatred. There was a book written in 1776 that guided much of the discipline of thinking that brought us to the discovery of our freedoms, of our God-given freedoms. It was Thomas Paine's Common Sense, written in 1776, one of the first American bestsellers, in which Thomas Paine explained by rational principles the reason why these small colonies felt the necessity to separate from the powerful Kingdom of England and the King of England. He explained their inherent desire for liberty, freedom, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, and he explained it in ways that were understandable to the people, to all of the people. A great deal of the reason for America's constant ability to self-improve is because we are able to reason, we're able to talk to each other, we're able to listen to each other, and we're able to analyze. We are able to apply our God-given common sense. So let's do it. This is Rudy Giuliani back with another episode of Rudy Giuliani's Common Sense. And today's episode is, of course, a continuation of that very, very interesting interview with Roger Stone, so that Roger can complete the analysis and the description of just exactly how he was framed by these unethical, maniacal prosecutors who had just one thing in mind, and that was to prevent Donald Trump from being president or to take his presidency away from him, no matter what, and at whatever cost necessary, including violating ethics and laws. We'll also talk to Roger in this interview a bit about the current political situation, because Roger is really one of the 4 or 5 biggest experts on that with so much experience in presidential campaigns. So let's go back to our interview with Roger Stone. Well, there's many, many things that he had no interest in that would have been entirely exculpatory. For example, the meeting with Donald Jr., with the Russian woman who was originally offering information on Hillary, then came in and spoke about Russian adoptions, and then never contacted them again. That was clearly a setup with the guy who was essentially paid by Hillary Clinton to dig up dirt on Donald Trump.
As I recall, she met both before and after the Trump town meeting. That's called the briefing and the debriefing, for God's sake.
She met twice, the 2 nights before, and she left him to go to the meeting with Donald Trump, and then she reported to him the next night. And it's about as clear a case of a setup as you can get, and left out completely. And the role of a prosecutor is not to prosecute somebody. It's to get the truth, right? And in fact, one of the best things you can do is exonerate somebody as a prosecutor, if you have the opportunity to do it. But these men were totally maniacal, Trump derangement syndrome suffering. I can, as a person where this was their profession, I find them odious and disgraceful. Just so that people understand the case against you and how stupid it was, I think it comes down to they were charging you with having direct contact with Assange, knowing the full scope of everything that was going to come out, getting that information to Trump in advance. There was no evidence of that. You told them that that you were getting information from Mr. Credico. That was the only information you were getting. That appears to be absolutely solid. Yet they went ahead and prosecuted you anyway. And remember, I'm sure you remember, I want people to know, you didn't get anything close to a fair trial. You had a judge that convicted you the day you walked into court, and then you had jurors that were exceedingly prejudiced. I think any other case would have been reversed.
There's an intermediate step here that I think people need to understand, and that is on March 14th of 2019, Jeannie Rhee, who was heading the Get Stone squad inside the Mueller operation.
And what was she before?
She represented Hillary Clinton as a private attorney in the missing emails case, a case, by the way, where she lied to the judge in that case about how many emails there were and where they were. She was a partner of Robert Mueller's in his law firm, which should have conflicted him out as well. Anyway, she has all the charm of a North Korean prison guard when it comes to her demeanor, and she approached one of my attorneys and asked for a private meeting. This was after a hearing in Washington, D.C. And at that meeting, she said, "We think it's time for your client to cooperate. We think it's time for your client to confess. It's time for him to come clean and stop lying. Here's a list of phone calls between him and candidate Trump in 2016. He needs to admit that these were all about coordinating with WikiLeaks and the Russians in terms of the dates of the release of the WikiLeaks data." And when my lawyer, being a good lawyer, says, "Okay, if he were to do that, what would happen?" She said, "Well, we could talk about some kind of leniency in sentencing." And he said, "Well, I can't speak for my client. I doubt he will be inclined to do that, but I will speak to him." She said, "Please go out in the hallway. We'll give you your cell phone back. You can call him right now." So he got his cell phone back. He called me, and he's told me what had transpired. And I said, "Well, I can give you my decision right now." And he said, "No, I think we should get the other lawyers representing you into a conference call." I said, "There's no reason for that. I'm not interested in lying. I will not bear false witness against the president. These people would double cross you anyway. It would be a lie. I'd be taking down, the most important president in my lifetime, who I have deep affection for. If they think I'm Michael Cohen, they've got the wrong guy." So the answer I gave.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, Roger.
Oh, and by the way, that she also threatened that if I didn't cooperate, that a superseding indictment was not out of the question. Well, I did not cooperate.
Roger, you've got to convey to people how frightening that is. I know you made the right decision, but they basically are telling you, if you don't tell them what they want to hear, they're going to make every attempt to ruin the rest of your life.
Well, they had pretty much at that point ruined me to begin with. Recognize that in this epic struggle, I lost my home, I lost my savings, I lost my insurance. Because I was unconstitutionally gagged, I lost my ability to make a living, because I make a living by writing and speaking. I lost the ability to travel, as you know. So I was indigent at that point. Fortunately, 65,000 great Americans have stepped forward and contributed to my legal defense fund. I would never have been able to get through the first trial. But in the trial, in all honesty, Judge Jackson ruled out so many of the most powerful kinds of defense. My favorite one is Stone cannot raise the question of the misconduct of the special counsel, the FBI, the Department of Justice, or any member of Congress in his defense. That's unconstitutional.
Right.
Under Clouds v. Whitley. It's a simple matter, but I don't think this judge ever read the Constitution. I wasn't allowed to argue selective prosecution, that Comey, Mueller, Brennan, McCabe, Strzok, they all lied to Congress. But they lied about material matters. And I made misstatements that were of no consequence. Not allowed to raise that. The underlying premise of my indictment, the first 4 pages, you can read them. The Russians hacked the DNC and gave the information to WikiLeaks. I was prepared to introduce expert testimony and forensic evidence to challenge that assertion. No, I was not permitted to do that. This was cooked from the beginning. My jury, a jury of 100% Democrats. Not a single Republican, not a single independent, not a single military veteran, not a single union member, not a single blue-collar worker, not a single person with less than a college education, but a majority of jurors with post-college education. 3 attorneys on the jury. My jury looked like the Clinton-Obama administration alumni reunion.
Like the prosecutor's office.
And I had numerous individuals on the jury who had direct ties to the Justice Department, to the FBI. I even had one woman who went to law school with one of the prosecutors, and they were friendly. So, I mean, a jury of your peers, it's hard to understand how you couldn't get a single military veteran in this jury pool, but we didn't. And then, of course, we learned after the trial that the jury forewoman, who was a lawyer, was a protege of Donna Brazile, had run for Congress in Tennessee as a Democrat. In 2019, had attacked me personally on her Twitter and Facebook feeds, as well as attacking the president throughout the year, had those platforms on a private setting during jury selection and the trial, and then after the trial, she simply deleted them. Now, the judge ruled that that was not evidence of bias. I don't know any lawyer, Jonathan Turley, Alan Dershowitz, my friend for 30 years, Judge Andrew Napolitano, every lawyer I know looked at that and said, this violates the Supreme Court standard of an impartial and indifferent jury. But nonetheless, Judge Jackson affirmed my conviction and denied me a new trial.
We will now take a short break. Welcome back to the interview with Roger Stone. Well, then you were at the stage where you should have been granted for certain bail on appeal because you certainly had raised significant issues on appeal. So the standard, which people wouldn't know, is if you've been convicted, well, you don't go to jail right away if you have a arguable appeal. Doesn't have to be dead certain because you can't decide it before it's appealed, but you have to be able to present a couple of issues that show that there's a chance you would have a reversal. In your case, I would say, having seen some of those papers, there wasn't a chance it would be reversed. It would be hard to see how an impartial panel wouldn't reverse it. But he denied you bail on appeal.
Actually, we did not apply for bail on appeal because we had a more urgent issue almost immediately. They argued on the day I was convicted that I should have been incarcerated that day. They wanted me taken into custody that day. And the judge, thank God, decided that I wasn't a flight risk. I had shown up for every one of my hearings and appearances, and she allowed me to go home to get my affairs in order. But as the date for my incarceration approached, we had been under the misimpression that the Department of Justice and Federal Bureau of Prisons policy of moving those convicted of nonviolent crimes who were either in incarceration or about to be incarcerated to home confinement to protect them from COVID-19 would apply in my case, as it did for Michael Avenatti, as it did for Michael Cohen, as it did for Rick Gates. Unfortunately, the position of the Justice Department was that policy does not apply to Roger Stone. They wanted to send me, despite the precedent, because every single similarly situated individual in the previous 30 days who had gone to court to ask to be either transferred to home confinement or who in many cases had their sentences commuted to time served, had been honored in every precedent. So you had the policy of the DOJ and the BOP. You had the legal precedent in every circuit, including the DC circuit. You had the situation in the prison where they wanted to send me in Georgia, where the BOP insisted there were no coronavirus cases, but the prison guards union was insisting that that was a lie. And within days, they had 60 cases, then 100 cases. Now I believe they have more than 200 cases. Add to this that I'm 67 and I've been asthmatic my entire life. And we had a large submission under seal by my doctor, I've been the same doctor for 25 years. The judge ignored all of those precedents, all of those regulations, all of those facts, and ordered me to prison. A death sentence, no question about it. You see, they don't want my appeal to be heard. My appeal will take a year.
Right.
And my appeal is going to expose a lot of things the American people need to know. But here's the worst part, Mayor. Because I felt I had an obligation to exhaust every legal remedy that was realistic before appealing to the president for a humanitarian act of mercy in this case, I appealed her ruling to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, because I knew we were right on the law, the facts, the regulations across the board. And I was oddly confident that I would get a fair shake from them. 20 minutes before the president signed my commutation, the circuit court ruled 3-0 to send me to my death in some squalid prison in Georgia. It's like Kafka's The Trial. It's hard to believe.
At that point, was it? Did they want revenge against you, or were they still hoping they could crack you?
I just think that the D.C. Circuit was not going to overturn one of their own.
No, I meant the judge, Jackson. What was his motive? Just being vindictive, or did he think there was still a chance that Roger Stone would tell them what he had told them 5,000 times wasn't true?
Well, I mean, first of all, Judge Amy Berman Jackson made a 55-minute speech at my sentencing in which she said there was nothing phony about the Mueller investigation. Really? She said, you have been convicted of covering up for Donald Trump. That was not among the charges and not what I was convicted of.
Right.
She accused me of being belligerent, which is interesting since I never testified in my trial. And as I understand it, judges are only supposed to take into consideration that which is presented to the court. So was I belligerent when I refused to plead guilty to something I didn't do? I was accused yet again of foreign interference on the election, which I was not convicted of. And then the 4 prosecutors in my case, as you know, came up with a 7 to 9 year sentencing recommendation, attempting to hold me responsible and give me additional time for crimes I wasn't charged with, including foreign interference in the election. I wrote a book on the Mueller investigation called The Myth of Russian Collusion. It came out on February 9th. I was put under a gag order February 12th, but according to them, my book violated the gag order. Give him 6 more months. This was insanity. Then there's the most famous one. Stone threatened a federal judge. Let me clear this one up for you quickly. I posted an image that has in the upper left-hand corner the watermarked, trademarked logo of the organization that created the image. I have an affidavit from the graphic artist who designed it. It is not a crosshair. But by the end of the day, thanks to your typical fake news media frenzy, this became Stone produced an image with a rifle's crosshair superimposed over the judge's face. If you look at the images, this organization, which is called Corruption Central, creates of Joe Biden, of Kamala Harris, of Mark Zuckerberg. Their logo is in the upper left-hand corner of all those images. It is most definitely not a crosshair. When I was questioned about this under oath, what I said was, I apologized to the court for posting an image that was subject to misinterpretation. It was never my intention to threaten anyone. But that has become Stone threatened a federal judge. The prosecutors have used it over and over again as if it was a court-decided fact. It is not. I've done a lot of stupid things in my life, but that's not one of them. So look, it was a Soviet-style show trial. I mean, it was rigged start to finish, and the president, thank God, focused on particularly the incredible misconduct of the jury forewoman. And when the hearing was held with her to determine whether I should get a new trial, the judge essentially functioned as her defense attorney rather than as a judge. So, for example, my attorney said, Miss Hart, her name was Tamika Hart, on such and such a date, you posted a link to a story about the indictment against Roger Stone. Yet you said on the stand during voir dire that you were unfamiliar with the charges against him and really couldn't even recollect who he was. How do you square that? And the judge says, stop right there. I'm ordering you not to answer that question. Just because she posted a link to a story does not mean she read the story.
I hate to interrupt this very interesting interview, but it's time for a short break. Welcome back. Well, Roger, where does that leave us as a country now? We're in July of 2020. There's a decision that has to be made in a few months about whether this country continues like that, or we re-elect Trump to finish the job that he started. And why is it that we're having such trouble with a candidate? And I'm asking you now in a different role, the role you're even more familiar with. Why are we having such difficulty with a candidate that by any other election would have been knocked out twice? I mean, first for corruption, that's easily provable. And then second, he clearly is not mentally capable of doing the job. I mean, he proves it every time he speaks. And it's completely covered up by the media. How do we get to that point?
Let me get to your question in 1 second. First of all, I have to thank a number of individuals. First of all, I have to thank God for giving the president the guidance to literally save my life, something I prayed fervently for. I have to thank the president for his act of mercy and a humanitarian act, as well as an act of justice, for having the courage to do the right thing in a presidential year when so many around him were probably telling him not to do it. I have to thank you, Mayor, because you are an articulate advocate for fairness in this matter. I have to thank Bernie Carrick, the former police commissioner, who gave me wise counsel during this whole period. Tucker Carlson, who picked up the cudgels early and never quit.
He was extremely effective in conditioning public opinion, in correcting public opinion. I think
Sean Hannity,
he and Sean
Mark Levin,
oh my goodness, yeah.
All these guys, Mark Levin and I were never particularly close, but this wasn't about me. It was about the law and justice. And this guy did an incredible job of exposing the hypocrisy of the prosecution against me. The problem with this, of course, is when you start thanking people, you're always going to leave key people out. There are dozens of African-American pastors, evangelical Christians, Franklin Graham, who helped me spiritually enormously on this journey. I can't even begin to remember everybody because it's impossible. First and foremost, my poor wife and my own children and grandchildren, some of my grandchildren are not Trump supporters, but they're supporters of their grandfather. And they gave me enormous strength during this crisis. So for everybody who contributed, for everybody who gave me advice, for everybody who prayed for me, I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Well, that's a wonderful thing, Roger. Not everybody would take time out to do that. And it shows what a solid man you are.
Well, I'm trying to compile. I'm writing a piece.
I'm going to tell you one other thing that I admire, having prosecuted hundreds of cases and dealt with informants, and I admire your courage in sticking to the truth, because it would have been very easy. It would have been very easy for you to avoid all of this by just telling the prosecutors what they wanted to hear. And we know there are a substantial number of people who do that. When I was a prosecutor, I tried to be very careful that I wasn't victimized that way. But you can't be sure. The temptation was terrific. Just say what they want, and you and your family can go lead a normal life. You'd probably even profit from it. You could go write a book. You'd be a hero for a while, at least, to the left-wing maniacs. It takes a strong man with a conscience to be able to withstand it. So you have my undying admiration.
Well, that's very kind. Here's what I do know. It's in a situation like this, in this kind of adversity, that you find out who your real friends are, and you find out who the people who claim to be your friends and never were. Take, for example, my friend Kristen Davis. She went on CNN and MSNBC right into the lion's den to beat those jackals back and defend them. That takes real courage. I can't even begin to thank all those that I owe thanks to. Now, let me go to your question because it's central.
Well, I'm going to thank you for for standing up so that all of the people that supported you now I think that they feel good about the fact that they did the right thing and they were on the side of justice.
Even today, you have hours ago in front of the House Judiciary Committee, even the day after my commutation, in which somebody ghost wrote a piece for Robert Mueller in the Washington Post, we're all the way back to the beginning. Stone was a Russian agent. Stone made a deal with Trump, and he remained silent about Trump's misconduct in return for commutation. That is a lie. There's no evidence to support that. In fact, the exact opposite is true. I was squeezed to bear false witness against the president. They take your statement, they lift out what they want, and they try to use it to justify a falsehood. In fact, Hillary Clinton herself said on MSNBC night before last, Stone was threatening the president privately and publicly. Well, I haven't spoken to the president from last Friday. I saw him when he was president-elect in his office in New York. That's the last time I have met with him privately. And I've never threatened. There's nothing to threaten him about. This woman is deranged. There's no question.
Oh, no. Yeah, there's no question.
So to go to the question of the election, I think it is fairly simple. The president was put into a terrible situation in which he had revived the American economy to a point that no one thought possible. We had, thanks to his program of tax cuts and regulatory cuts and negotiating much better trade deals, we had the strongest job growth, the strongest wage growth, and the highest levels of employment in our history. We had a record economy. And then, because he had no choice but to protect the public health, and because he had to err on the side of caution, because he had no way of knowing whether the projections of the scientists regarding coronavirus were right or wrong, he had to take the most cautious course, which was to close the country down, thus destroying his signature accomplishment. So now we're at a point where the economy is in terrible shape. It's a simple question for the American people. Do we want a man who has just proven that he knows exactly how to get America back on track and rebuild a booming economy? In fact, it's already happening, even though we're still plagued with coronavirus. Look at these job creation figures in the last 2 quarters. The Trump program is still working even today. Or do we want a man whose prescription for the sick patient will make the patient dead? Higher taxes, more regulation, and more big international trade deals that don't benefit our country. To me, it's a simple choice. And if the president makes that argument in a concise way for the American people, I am convinced that he will win. Then there's a secondary question, and that is the question of Joe Biden's role in turbocharging the war on drugs. Now, I am not a supporter of the war on drugs because I think it has proven to be an ignominious social and economic racist failure. The idea of giving people who are arrested with small amounts of drugs as a first-time nonviolent offense mandatory sentences where a judge has no discretion, where, let's say, a single mother of 3 is caught with a small amount of marijuana in her purse, should not go to prison for 25 years. Used to be the most draconian state in the country was New York, the Rockefeller laws. This has failed. Who is it who put that in place? It is Joe Biden. As chairman of the Judiciary Committee, Joe Biden is the father of the 1994 crime bill.
It's a signal achievement. In 40 years, that's the one thing he would always, until a year ago, it's the one thing he would brag about. One thing.
Now let's compare that with the record of Donald Trump, who through the Second Chance Act is basically saving people who are trapped in the bowels of our penal system with impossibly long sentences who are not violent criminals. So if you're a conservative, you've been paying billions of dollars to feed and house people who are not violent criminals. Drug abuse, I'm not talking about drug dealers and drug kingpins. Drug abuse is a public health problem, not a criminal justice problem. But Bill Clinton, with his wife cheering him on, and Joe Biden is personally responsible for the mass incarceration of more black people than anyone in American history. That comparison has to be made. Those 2 issues will reelect this president, in my opinion.
Well, your opinion is a very, very strong one, Roger. It has been a really fascinating interview, and if you don't mind, during the campaign, from now on, I want to talk to you about political issues, since we've gotten the since we've gotten the injustice to you out of the way, except for one thing. How do you feel? Well, let me tell you how I feel and how I feel a lot of the people that support the president, support you, support me, our let's call it our base. They want to see the people who did this prosecuted. So the argument is, oh, it's behind us. We shouldn't continue it. As a former prosecutor, I believe this has to be prosecuted to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Well, it's a vexing problem, and I'll tell you why. Because when the 4 highly political prosecutors who attempted to give me a 9-year sentence, which the guidelines were 18 months, by the way.
Right.
I got 40, and I would argue with that, but the new prosecutors succeeded in convincing the judge that that was correct. Even the judge thought that the original recommendation was excessive. That same week, the prosecutor in my case, J.P. Cooney, the new prosecutor, decided that Andrew McCabe should not be prosecuted. We know that 2 Inspector General's reports from the Department of Justice have recommended to the Attorney General that James Comey be prosecuted in both cases for crimes more serious than those in which I was tried. But the Attorney General took a pass. So while I am hopeful that Special Counsel John Durham, who has an excellent reputation in my native state of Connecticut, will see that justice is done, I don't understand why it's taking so long. It took them less than a year to charge me and bring me to trial. And this is not exactly rocket science. We now know from declassified documents exactly what happened. So do we have a 2-tier justice system in which only General Michael Flynn, who is one of the greatest men I've ever had the privilege to meet, and Roger Stone are the only ones prosecuted, Paul Manafort, and the elite of the Democratic Party can commit any crime they wish, and they're not held responsible for them. Mueller and Weissman and Rosenstein, who lied under oath in a hearing 3 weeks ago, said he didn't approve my prosecution when we know that he did. When's he being prosecuted? Will these people just walk away and nothing happen? They are so confident that the American people are asleep. They're back to saying there was Russian collusion again, as if that's a credible claim at this point. It's an open question. I am praying for the country that there's justice. I am praying, but I can already see Mr. Durham announcing his decision after the election, and that would be outrageous if that is the case.
There really is, unfortunately, it's been there for some time, the double standard. And until it's corrected, this country is going to be afflicted with tremendous bitterness and division because it's so apparent. Just to close out, as a former prosecutor, I looked at both of these investigations, the one of Hillary Clinton and the one of Donald Trump. In the case of Hillary Clinton, every single person around her, the Donald Stones and the Manaforts and the Carter Pages and the Papadopouloses, they were all given immunity. They were let off the hook immediately. There's no pressure asserted on them to even tell the truth, much less to lie. So you really didn't have an investigation of her. They were all free on day one. It
was fixed. I mean, you can.
It was.
What Greta Lynch and Bill Clinton talking about on the tarmac?
It was like a fixed boxing match, fixed from the beginning, and they had to play it out. And they even made some mistakes, like Comey wrote the report 3 months before he interviewed her, which is completely absurd. Then we get to Trump, and everybody around him is persecuted, and when they could, prosecuted for crimes that they had to create. Every single crime they allege happened after the incident. They were created. I mean, the Flynn crime was created, your crime was created, the Papadopoulos crime was orchestrated. The difference in treatment is very, very dangerous, and it has to change.
Well, if you looked at last week's New York Times, Andrew Weissman has an op-ed in which he says, we can still get the truth from Roger Stone by taking him in front of the grand jury. Hey, Andrew, you had 3 years to take me in front of the grand jury, but you didn't. The person who belongs in front of a grand jury, the charges being treason and sedition, as well as fraud, is Andrew Weissman. This is as clear as as the Italian-American nose on my face. So I'm still waiting for justice. I don't understand how long these criminals will continue to get away with what they've done. Robert Mueller himself lied to Congress during his testimony. I can prove it, but he's not been charged. No, I agree with you. The patriots out there, those who support the president, we're still waiting for justice,
yes.
But I think the skepticism grows as to whether
it's going to have to be
happen.
changed. I look forward to talking to you about that because you're someone that can bring a lot of power to that argument. But let's get past this election first. And that's also something I'm so glad to see, that you're free to give advice and that you're free to think on it, because you're one of the best we have.
Thank you very much. It's very kind.
Thank you, Roger. And again, my prayers, my support, my empathy to your family for what they went through, because it had to be terrible. Had to be terrible on them. Even worse on them than you, because you can at least count, you're fighting back. So you're in a fighting back mode. They're just sitting there not knowing what's going to happen. So I'm so glad, and I'm also glad that our friend, the president, had the courage to do it. A lot of presidents would have waited until after the election. A lot of them would have.
Mayor, my mentor in politics, as you know, was former President Richard Nixon. And he once said, a man is not finished when he's defeated. He's only finished when he quits. Until one has been in the deepest valley, when one cannot appreciate the majesty of the highest mountaintop. That's how I looked at this from the beginning.
Yes.
Donald Trump could be the greatest president in my lifetime, and that's tough because Eisenhower, Nixon, Reagan were all presidents that I lived under. But he's a man of enormous courage, enormous stamina. He didn't need this job. This job is costing him a fortune. He didn't need the daily vituperation and hate of the fake news media, and yet he still keeps pushing forward.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It's amazing. That's why I love him so much, and why I am so indebted to him for saving my life, for doing the right thing in a tough year. So God bless you,
and
Mayor.
God bless you, and we're indebted to you for being an honest man. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Be with you.
Well, that was a very, very, I think, very interesting interview and a soul-searching interview, and I think you see the quality of human being that Roger Stone is. And we just have to thank God that we had that kind of human being in that situation. Otherwise, these people who wanted to frame the President of the United States, if they could have found a willing vessel, could have been a very different result. Well, thank you for being with us, and we'll be back with another edition of Rudy Giuliani's Common Sense very shortly. Hello, this is Rudy Giuliani with Rudy Giuliani's Common Sense. And today we have the honor of interviewing David Harris Jr. And I hope you know that just a week ago, David interviewed me. So this is like a home and home series. I thought the interview was really interesting and really in depth. And I think David has an awful lot to offer and explain about what we're going through right now, which seems to me like a crisis. David, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely, Mayor. It's an absolute pleasure and honor, sir. Thank you for having me.
David, I wake up this morning, like for the last 4 to 5 weeks, and I see riots almost every day in at least 7 or 8 cities, 9 cities. Some of them terrible, like Portland looks to me like Vietnam. I can't even see the people. There's so much smoke and fire, I can't even see the people. Every day we've got a 17-year-old killed. We had a 17-year-old killed here in New York City over the weekend. A 1-year-old, a 5-year-old. We get 20 murders in Chicago. What do we do? What do we do about this, and how do we explain it? And then we'll go into the details about it, just like your general view of it.
Well, I think, Mayor, it is really important that we identify exactly what this group, Black Lives Matter, is. I truly believe they're a domestic terrorist organization, cloaking themselves in a phrase that nobody can argue with, similar to Planned Parenthood, who wants to argue with, why you should Planned Parenthood, yet that's not what Planned Parenthood's all about. They're all about murdering babies and then selling baby parts. Black Lives Matter has cloaked themselves in this social justice cause, with inflated numbers, with a perception of blacks being hunted down by cops and shot at record pace, which is just not true. It's not the facts. Actually, police violence and even police on unarmed individuals, black, white, Hispanic, but especially blacks, and so what we're talking about, has declined over the last several years. Last year, there was 10 unarmed black men that were shot and killed by police. 5 of those instances, the individuals actually were wrestling with the officer or trying to aggressively, go after the officer or his weapon. 2 of those, the cops were actually charged criminally. 1 was considered an accident. But I mean, again, we're talking about 10. Yet this entire movement of Black Lives Matter is sucking in all of the people that are in the middle that actually think that there's this systemic problem with racism in our country that's keeping black Americans down, when I don't think anything could be further from the truth. We live in the greatest country in the world that's provided the most opportunity to all ethnic backgrounds. Anybody that wants to make something of themselves in this country, they have the ability and the opportunity to do it. But this movement has cloaked itself in a lie, and it's sucking in a whole lot of people that don't really see what's going on and are just kind of going along with the flow and trying not to ruffle any feathers. And it's truly a sad state of affairs.
The first thing people, I think, should know about them is that they're funded in large part by George Soros.
Yes.
He's also the one that funded many of these district attorneys who I would consider criminal-friendly, police-hating district attorneys who let the rioters out as soon as they get arrested. The woman in St. Louis who's charging those people with all sorts of crimes for defending themselves, that's a George Soros plant. And a lot of their money comes from George Soros, but the person that gets their money, it's almost like a flow-through, is a woman named Susan Rosenberg. Now, I know Susan Rosenberg because she was prosecuted by the Justice Department when I was there. Susan Rosenberg is a convicted terrorist.
Yes.
She was sentenced to 58 years in jail, I believe. She should be in jail for the number of police officers that were killed. And then she was pardoned when Clinton gave all those dirty pardons, as he was leaving office, when he pardoned Mark Rich, another group of terrorists. Big question as to whether he got money for a lot of that. Well, all of a sudden she got pardoned. And do you know who got her pardon? You'll be shocked. I just figured that out through the literature. Jerry Nadler.
Really?
Jerry Nadler. That's when he was actually morbidly obese. Now he's just obese, but he was morbidly obese then. He got her the pardon, and I want to find out why Jerry Nadler would get a person who was dedicated to killing police officers. At her sentence, Susan Rosenberg said, "I have remorse." So everybody thought she was going to say something. She was sorry. "I have remorse because when I got arrested, I didn't shoot it out with the police. At least I could have taken them down with me." And we let her out.
Unbelievable.
It's one thing to give somebody a pardon who at least is willing to say, "I'm sorry." Right? It's another thing to say, absolutely. "I still want to kill police and overthrow your country." And she found, now she found her vehicle. So to think that Black Lives Matter is an entirely black group is also wrong.
Yes.
A lot of the financing, a lot of the direction, a lot of the coordination with Marxist groups elsewhere. You got a lot of white people involved in it, and you have a lot of anarchists involved in it. And it's part of a big movement to change our way of life, to basically change both our government and our way of life. The first thing they put out when they formed, the 3 women formed, their first goal didn't have to do with police brutality. It had to do with doing away with the nuclear family because it was destroying the black community. Now, that's short for doing away with fathers.
Yes.
Now, David, explain to me how anybody with half a brain would want to have less fathers in a society, not just in the black community, but all throughout our society now. We have too many fatherless children, and the outcomes for them, unfortunately, are much worse. These are just facts than if you have a mother and a father. Now, sometimes a mother by herself can do a great job, but she's working against the odds.
Yeah, she is.
So how does the black community, which I know realizes the importance of family, how does the black community react to something like that? They just don't hear it, I don't think. Like the white people don't hear that.
Yeah, I don't think that they are hearing that. That's not the message that the mainstream media, the liberal media, even Fox is really talking about too much. It's a message that we've got to try to get out there. You know, it saddens me when I see very prominent pastors, ministers in the Black community, and I'm talking about, you know, mega church pastors. I won't say his name, but I just recently saw a message that he said where he was basically showing support for Black Lives Matter. And this is a Christian pastor. I say he obviously doesn't know what these people stand for. He obviously doesn't know that they are anti-faith. They are anti-God. They're anti the family unit, the way that God created and constructed our family foundation should be. They're anti everything that has to do with what the Black community in this country used to hold so dear. We've been a rich culture and have a rich heritage of faith in God and belief in overcoming obstacles and God's goodness and protecting the lives of unborn babies. And it so saddens me that so many believers, especially Christians and especially Christian pastors, don't see and know this for what it is. It is an absolute onslaught attack from the enemy against Christian values, against family, against everything that that the Black community used to hold so dear. So they need to hear about it. They need to wake up. We all better wake up, because if this movement is not labeled what it is, if it's not perceived as what it is, it's something that could continue to grow and suck into it the minds that are not clear on the facts. And then you've got to reverse racism that's starting to happen, where now Blacks, you know, I've seen some in the Black community that feel like now they're better than whites. And we've been oppressed and now we're better. And Nick Cannon came out and shared those sentiments. That's that, right. Oh, well, it's because of our dark skin that actually we have, you know, something better. No. It's an identity crisis that people are dealing with. People are dealing with an identity crisis. And that's where, as a believer, as a person of faith, I know my identity doesn't come from my skin color. It comes from my Creator. And that gives me confidence to then move forward and act and operate in this life with faith, courage, love, and support of my family, my wife. But I'm the target. I've been married 26 years to my high school sweetheart. We have 2 amazing daughters. We've got a solid family. And,
I see the pictures.
I'm going to be the enemy.
Your daughters are lovely. I see the pictures on Instagram, and it's really very endearing, and it's wonderful. And it's the best part of your life. I have 2 children. Last week, my son and I won a father-son golf tournament.
Oh, wow.
All because of him. And
wow.
It's my proudest trophy. I mean, I would show it to you, but it's in the other room. I show everybody that comes in here. It's like I won it. You know, I really didn't win it. I was on his back. He was a professional golfer before he works for President Trump now. In fact, he's President Trump's favorite partner.
That's awesome.
One of the reasons I'm so close to the president, because the president acted like an uncle to my son and really helped him a lot in many ways. People have no idea what a good man Donald Trump is, because he's tough. And I was like that when I was mayor. I was running a city that had 2,400 murders, 2 riots before I became mayor, organized crime, terrorism, every problem in the world. If I was a marshmallow, they'd have walked all over me. I had to be tough.
Yeah.
But when that ended, when I became who I really was. I didn't have to be that tough during September 11th. He's the same way. If you see the compassion that he has for people, it's amazing. It's amazing that they attack him this much. But getting back to the main part of it. Now the other thing, which I'm sure you know, but nobody else knows, and part of this is to educate them. They are in favor of abortion.
Yeah.
But abortion. I mean, right up to the very end. Like the moment before the baby comes out of the womb, you can kill the baby. And you know, and I would like to question them if they also subscribe to that idiot Governor Northam's
infanticide
statement. Yeah. I mean, how does that guy survive having said that? He basically said you can commit murder. I don't care what you think about abortion. I mean, I do, but let's put that aside. Whatever you think about abortion. Now the baby is out of the womb. And this idiot says the mother and the doctor have a little time to think about what they're going to do.
Absolutely disgusting. So evil.
It just shows how crazy. It shows how crazy we've become, David. And I
think it shows you how crazy the Democrat Party have become and the liberals have become. I mean, I don't think that's a message that's being championed. I mean, we know it's not from the conservative side.
Right.
You know, that's one of the main reasons why I did not vote for Obama. You know, I was excited for the opportunity to vote for a black guy, a black man for president.
You mean when he first ran in 2008? Back in 2008.
Yeah.
Yeah, that must have been a difficult choice. When I was young, I supported Jack Kennedy because he was a Catholic. And as Catholics, back then, this is in the 50s and 60s, we felt somewhat discriminated against. And as Italians, we felt discriminated against. You know that Italians are the second most lynched group?
Yes.
No one knows that. Second most lynched group, Jews are third. Of course, blacks by far the most.
Yeah.
But I can empathize with that. When you identify with something that was part of you, a lot of politics falls aside. So how did you make that decision?
Well, I did what my mom had raised me and taught me to do, and when I did speak to her, she's in heaven right now. But when I did talk to her, she said, "David, pay attention to how he votes, how he's voted on the issues that matter to you. You know, think for yourself, do your own research." And so when I began to research how he voted on issues of abortion, and found out that he voted in favor of partial birth abortion, where literally they have to dismember the baby because it's so big and suck it out in pieces out of the woman, because they can do it up until the point of birth. And then when I found out that he had voted against a bill that would have provided medical treatment to babies that survived abortions, I said, I don't care what color this guy is, he's not getting my vote. You know, if that's off with somebody's moral compass, harming a baby, who could ever conceive of harming a baby that's been out of the womb 1 hour or 1 day? Yet 1 hour outside of the womb compared to 1 hour before it comes out of the womb is somehow okay in the minds and hearts of these Democrats that believe that abortion, partial birth abortion, is okay. If that's off with somebody's moral compass, then what the heck else is off with their moral compass? Because to me, that's a huge issue.
You know, what you just described is probably one of the biggest problems we have. What you said was, you went and read. You didn't just listen to NBC, CBS, ABC, even Fox, whatever. You were inclined toward this man because you could identify with him. And then you went and read about him to find out who is he really. Now, if people would, for example, let's say black people, 60% and more favor vouchers.
Yeah.
They favor, and I favor vouchers, always have, because I think that parents are going to make a better choice for their children than the government bureaucrats.
Absolutely.
I'd even put the public school systems on a voucher system. So you get to pick your public school, and then we got to work with who gets in and who doesn't get in. Anything, when I ran or was sort of in charge of the New York City school system, I only had 2 out of 5 votes, but I tried to run it. I always tried to do anything I could to get the parents involved. If I could get the parents into the classroom or into the schoolroom, I all of a sudden accomplished something. The minute you can get the parents or the grandparents involved in the education, it just goes right up. So to say to parents, you know, give them you make the choice.
Absolutely.
It's very, very important. And
school choice is huge.
I arranged a choice program in a middle-class African-American area of New York. It's the area near LaGuardia, Kennedy Airport. And my deputy mayor for 8 years, Rudy Washington, was a very big member of the church there. And they had both Catholic and Protestant parochial schools. There were 3 parochial schools that the black churches ran. And they had 3 Catholic schools. So we didn't have to discriminate and say only Catholics, only Protestants. And they had a few Jewish schools. The district wanted to do it. The district voted for it, which was probably 60% black. Voted for it overwhelmingly, like 70, 75%. My board of education, where I was outvoted, voted it down because the teachers union threatened them.
Wow.
Threatened them with having no future in education if they voted for choice. And the people there wanted it. And I think choice is the biggest civil rights issue that we have right now, because it's the way we get a good education for the large number of kids. So,
absolutely.
So most black people, 60%, most, right, want it.
Yeah.
Almost every black politician that isn't a Republican is against it.
Yeah.
I don't think they ever find out. I don't think they ever go look and see, oh my God, Charlie Rangel's been voting against choice for 30 years. What am I voting for him for? I want choice for my kids.
Exactly. Exactly.
And the same thing with Black Lives Matter. Nobody's looking at this thing here, which has everything that we're talking about in it. I'm not making it up. I mean, they really do want to have abortion for everybody. They want a lifetime wage paid to them forever, but only to them. Now that would create such class division.
Yeah, it would.
I mean, there are a lot of poor people in this country that are white, that are Hispanic.
Yeah.
Some may be poorer than black people.
Yeah.
And you're only going to give it to one group. That creates wars.
Absolutely. Animosity, bitterness, resentment, and which will breed chaos.
So what, as Republicans, this is a question we've been asking for 30 years. I certainly have, because, you know, I was the mayor of a city with a large black population, a large Hispanic population. We no longer have a majority in New York. We probably have more whites, plurality, but we're sort of white, Hispanic, black. And no majority. We used to be majority white. Our police department now, and I made it that, is majority nothing. Majority nothing. So how do we, as Republicans, the party that was aligned completely with the black community coming out of slavery, you know, Jackie Robinson, the great baseball player, was a Republican because his family was Republican, right?
Yeah.
How do we put that together? Because I really do think the Republican Party under Trump represents more of the values of the African American or black community. Not the whole community, but 60%, 50%, 60%. How do we break that barrier? It's like a wall that exists.
You know, I think all of us have a part to play. You know, everybody listening to or watching your podcast right now should be sharing that to as many people as they can. Sharing my podcast, like you said,
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to have you on the David J. Harris Jr. show.
It's great. David.
Shameless plug there, brother.
No. It's education. More than I mean, you should do it all the time. It's very, very educational.
Thank you.
I mean, it's the way to get behind these people. Is what we're doing right now, and what you're doing.
Absolutely.
We're telling them things.
Yeah.
Because we have a biased media, we're telling them things they should know. I mean, they should know that the three women who run this say, they don't lie about it. They say we're Marxists.
Yeah.
And we want to overthrow your government.
Right. Yeah.
Press
and the
doesn't
nuclear
print it.
family.
Yeah.
So I think that everybody has a part to play. You know, mine before I blew up and some of my videos started going viral and that led me down the path that I'm on. I was just sharing articles with friends, with family. I'd post articles on my page and hoping that somebody would see it and would learn something from it. So, you know, we all have something that we can do, and we have to understand and realize that we are in a fight. We're in a battle for our country. And we're in a battle against misinformation, you know, and it's the mainstream media, the liberal mainstream media, that is continually sharing misinformation, disinformation, or just not the right information. They don't want to talk about what this president has done. So many interactions that I have with black individuals, Hispanic individuals, specifically when I bring up what this president has done with prison reform, when I bring up what he's done with the opportunity zones, when I bring up what he's done with his tax reform bill and how that created the lowest ever unemployment rate in the black community. When I bring up his historic record funding for historical black colleges and universities, they have no idea.
Right.
Most of the people I talk to, they have no idea whatsoever that he's done any of these things. And so I say, try to get off of your, you know, whatever you're used to watching. Normally it's CNN or MSNBC. I said, do some research, go research these things specifically, and you'll find out that this current president, Donald Trump, has done more for the black community than any president probably since Abraham Lincoln. You know, now I understand the Republican Party. I believe because there was such a monolithic voting for the Democrat Party that the Republicans just kind of said, well, we're just going to leave them alone. We're not going to really go up, you know, try to engage as a whole. Individuals like Mike Huckabee, I think, was against the grain on that. He had amazing results
Always.
with what he did. I think you did too, obviously. But I think overall, there's been that kind of gap where a lot of the Republicans just didn't reach out because there's been such a blind allegiance to this Democrat Party that just gets our votes, just like, you know, without even having to do anything. Just pull the race card, pull the victim card, and, you know, the Republicans are racist, so vote for us. What I believe Donald Trump has done is brought the Republican Party back to its roots of being that anti-slavery, that civil rights party that championed for Black Americans. At the same time, he's being a champion for all Americans, and I believe truly the last stopgap from saving our country. If Joe Biden was to get elected, whoever he winds up deciding, or whoever decides for him, because I don't think he's even going to be the one to pick who his VP is, but if he was to get elected, his VP will probably wind up taking office within 30, 60, 90 days, because Joe's obviously battling something mental. So, and then it'd be pedal to the metal. It would be an all-out attack and assault on everything that's conservative, that's Christian, everything that this current president Donald Trump has done for this country. That would be a very scary time. It could progress into some very dangerous zones. But at the very least, what we do know that they will do is they'll push their Green New Deal. They'll push this country towards socialism, and the beautiful United States of America that we all have known and loved will be gone.
Yeah, they'll also pass bills that make abortion easier. If they get a majority of the House, Senate, and the presidency, they'll probably move into public funding of abortion, which would be terrible, because then those of us who find it to be morally wrong or sinful, if you want to use a religious term, what our money is going to have to be used for.
Yeah.
At least a compromise was reached in the Hyde Amendment that if you're going to have abortion, it can't come out of public funds. So you and I or others don't have to pay for something we think is akin to murder. They'll change that immediately.
Yeah.
They'll have a heck of a battle, but they're going to attempt to change private education and get rid of it. They want to get rid of all parochial schools. They want to get rid of all choice in education. Now, they'll have a heck of a battle with that, but there'll be no chance for charter schools to grow, private schools to, private vouchers to grow, which are showing real promise. In New York, we have a number of these charter schools like Success Academy, fabulous results. And they don't cherry pick. They take children full spectrum. In other words, from the smartest to the kids who don't do well. They are so successful that de Blasio tried to do away with them.
Wow.
Came into office, he tried to do away with them, and Cuomo did a good thing in saving them. But it's almost as if they do things that are counterproductive to the black community, realizing its potential. They don't want fathers in families. They don't want fathers in families. They don't want them to improve education, right? They do want to give more welfare, so you get more money for not working than working, which is a terrible thing to do.
Mayor, I believe that we've just exposed the real systemic racism.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's
what these
cynical politicians have done. Cynical political purposes.
Yep. Well, to keep the black community as victims that need help from the government, to keep them voting blue.
And now we have this new group that wants to move us towards socialism, and I think they found the unfortunate and unjustified murder of Mr. Floyd a perfect vehicle for it. Although Mr. Floyd has been long forgotten. These people that are demonstrating,
unfortunately, yeah.
I mean, first of all, there seem to be more whites than blacks in many of these riots.
Yeah, there are in all the videos I see. Yep.
The ones I saw in New York, majority white, 60%, 65%. But in any event, that doesn't matter. What matters is what they're trying to do. They're trying to overthrow our way of life, and we have to stand up. We have to fight back and make sure it doesn't happen.
Yep.
I did think that the unjustified murder of Mr. Floyd was going to be a time that we united.
It could have been.
And I'll tell you why. When I first heard about it, I immediately started to get telephone calls from mostly retired police officer friends of mine, who usually call me on the other side of it. They usually call me and say, look what they're doing to the cop. It's so unfair. They're making it much worse than it really is. I mean, the guy swung at him first, and they're pro-police, very pro-police. And I was going to say to him, I said, when I took the first call, I said to him, what is he going to say about this? I mean, come up with a good one about this one. The guy just deliberately murdered him, being told he was murdering him. Every call that I got from let's say the hardest right, were horrified. Horrified. This was wrong. There's a point here. This has got to stop. We can't have a cop like this. Among other things, it puts the lives of every other cop in jeopardy.
Yeah.
What's wrong with this guy? He's not one of us. They said, look, Benedict Arnold wasn't one of us. Everybody has traitors. Everybody has traitors in their group. And I said, wow, we're gonna. And then I heard some of the left-wing groups say they're saying the same thing on television, first time in years. And I think these people like Antifa, Black Lives Matter, the radical Democrats, I think they had to drive a wedge. They did. Yeah, and instead, what could have been a unifying moment becomes this craziness that we have.
Yeah.
But there's still plenty to work together on and get over this. I think what you're doing, what I'm doing, what all these people are doing with this alternative media now, it does mean that people are getting their information from varied sources much more than they did in the past. Yes.
Yeah, that is a great aspect of what we do have, is that social media and influencers like you and I can bring our influence, our minds, our thoughts, our knowledge to people, directly to the people through podcasts and social media. We have the opportunity to bypass the mainstream media and give people an alternative. And so that's what I do. My website, davidharrisjr.com. It's a great place to get my book too, Why I Couldn't Stay Silent. I know that's something that says woke a lot of people up that read it.
Yep.
And I just we all have a part to play. But I believe that God is good. I think that he is for this president. This president is for all Americans. He's for the black community. And I truly believe if we can somehow take the House, keep the Senate, and reelect Donald J. Trump, I believe the next 4 years will be absolutely something out of this world.
Well,
all Americans will see.
That's a great concluding thought, David. It really was a pleasure being interviewed by you, and also a pleasure interviewing you.
Thank you so much, Mayor.
So now I owe you one. Okay.
Thank you, brother. Thank you so much.
God
Mayor.
bless your
God
work.
bless you.
God bless your work and your family.
Thank you so much. You too.
That was the interview with David Harris Jr. As you can see, an extraordinarily intelligent, very, very thoughtful man who's having a big influence on how we think and countering so much of the fake media propaganda in so powerful a way. So thank you very much, David.
Please subscribe to our backup channels on YouTube: Inglorious Patriots, Net4 Truth USA 2 Patriot Channel, and Ethernet Warriors. You can also catch us on BitChute.com/Net4Truth USA, remonetized.org/user/Inglorious-Patriots9, and drop.space/@Net4Truth USA. All the links are in the description. We fly so close to the target, we are on our 5th fighter jet. We will be relentless and persistent until the enemies of freedom are defeated. You can support this channel by using the links in the description, but for a $100 donation, I will personally send you a autographed hardcover special edition copy of Land of Childhood's Fears. Also, visit my bookstore at lulu.com/Net4Truth USA. If you are viewing this video on BitChute, you can use the links in the description to support us, or simply click the green $ dot on our video to support this channel. Thank you. Links are in the description section.